Good morning. I'm here at Stream of the Many Eyes, surrounded by people that are far more intelligent and creative than I am, and it's a little daunting, to be honest. Like, it's a little spooky, but here we are. I'm here with most of the senior team from Dungeons and Dragons. Nate, and actually, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Okay.
Because I don't want to steal your.
Hello, I am Nathan Stewart. I am the leader of this yawning. No, I'm Nathan Stewart. I'm the director of Dungeons and Dragons.
I'm Jeremy Crawford. I'm the lead rules designer for Dungeons and Dragons.
And I'm Mike Mearls. I'm the creative director on D&D.
See, I would have got all those titles horribly wrong. And I'm so glad that I avoided that trap quite nightly by being like, oh, just roll a charisma check and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
It'll be fine.
Oh.
So I wanted to talk about the evolution of Dungeons and Dragons and kind of your starting points with the systems and the story, and then how they've kind of got to where we are in 2018, and then a look at kind of where they go beyond. Because my first question is what's the most annoying stereotype that you still hear about Dungeons and Dragons in 2018? Or the most annoying convention about the game?
So for me, it's been the same throughout the game's history, actually. And that is any time, and thankfully it's very rare these days to hear it, but you still might occasionally hear that D&D is a boys' game. And for me, that's always been an annoying stereotype, because I was introduced to D&D by my sister Amy. And so for me, D&D has always been a game that people of all sorts can play.
Yeah, and I think the idea too, I don't hear this as often, but this idea that D&D players are like basement dwellers, right? That's the phrase people use. Where even in the 80s, when I would hear that, it made no sense to me, because D&D is so social. Right.
Yeah, we always played at the kitchen table.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that was the center of the house, right?
Yeah,
right.
We weren't off in the basement where no one saw it. Like Aunt Jeannie was there, my cousins were. Like it was in the center of the common area.
And just the idea that you wouldn't want to play with antisocial people, right? Like,
Yeah.
It's not like we're off, it's the idea that the best D&D players are the ones who were the most outgoing and funny, and I think that's why streaming's been interesting.
And probably in drama club.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Right.
I think the thing that I still hear that is the most frustrating for me is that it's hard to learn, or that oh yeah, I want to try and play, but but I'm nervous about I think that the idea that this comes from books and that there is a lot of words and numbers and funny shaped dice kind of leads people to a natural conclusion that there's a steep learning curve, when in fact these fine folks here have made a really strong point on 5th edition that the learning curve comes way later. Like, you'll naturally just go. I mean, you come to the table and you say, hey, I want to try and reach for your sword. Okay, well, he'll arbitrate that. He'll tell us how that works.
Right.
You don't have to know anything other than that sword looks cool, or I want it, or you look dangerous, right? So,
Right.
So I think that's the most frustrating one for me.
Yeah, I often tell brand new players they need to know only one rule, and that is, tell me as the dungeon master what you want to do, and I'll tell you how to do it. That's it.
See, I feel like whenever I talk to people about it, it's like if I can play it, anyone can play it. Because journalists are inherently bad at math. It's something that we're not good at. And so, thankfully, I have all those character sheets that all work it out for me, and a DM that goes, you're actually rolling 7 dice when you're only supposed to roll 3. And I'm like, oh.
Can I take the highest 3?
It's like, can I not do that now? Has the horse gone out of the gate? Because I didn't realize I was going to only be able to roll 3, and that significantly changes the amount of damage I'm going to do to this dragon. So can I actually just go that way and just leave the dragon alone? I don't want to actually fight the dragon. So in terms of it evolving, you were saying that it's only a boys' game, and obviously now, what are the statistics in terms of split? It doesn't have to be accurate, but sort of like, what's the rough feeling of a split between men and women playing the game now? And
We're creeping up on almost 40% women.
Right.
The last poll that we took, I think, had it at 37 or 38% female, and we've seen a couple different studies not done by us that put them in the same range. So everything we think is that we're high 30s, low 40s, and going up, going the right direction.
Yeah.
So.
And is it the same with other ethnicities that are playing the game? Is there, because I mean, obviously, the big stereotype that I, as a journalist and as a player, have always heard is that it is not only a men's game, but it's also for white people. That you don't really get many ethnicities playing it. Now, from personal experience, I know that to be what I would describe in England as bollocks, because I've always played with multicultural people, and in fact, some would argue that there has been so much effort to remove gatekeeping from nerd culture in the black community that there's been an explosion of it. I mean, we've seen things like, Solo having Donald Glover as a wonderful, wonderful Lando Calrissian, and Lando having a massive part now in the Star Wars universe, and obviously Black Panther was a huge film, and there are more and more films coming out. So, in terms of Dungeons and Dragons, it's kind of always made the same. And I just want to know, sort of, was there anything that you have intentionally, or how do you tackle the issue of diversity in the game?
Well, it's something we tackled in the art of the game, especially going right into the Player's Handbook, the first book of 5th edition. We made sure that not only were the heroes 50% male, 50% female, but we also made sure that you would see a wonderful diversity of different types of people. People with different skin color, people also of different species, since of course Dungeons and Dragons has non-humans in it. But
and you've got to represent those reptiles in real life.
That's right.
The reptile overlords that secretly run the world have to have their own characters.
yeah.
But especially important to us is any time we were depicting humans is to show the wonderful diversity of people in real life, so that players could come to our books and see there's a place for me at this table.
Have you heard stories like that from the community where people
Absolutely.
didn't necessarily said, you know, Dungeons and Dragons has really helped me create strong bonds with other members of the community that has helped me kind of broaden my range or anything like that?
Actually, some of my favorite interactions over the last 4 years since 5th edition came out is I've gone to conventions where I've had people of color, women, fellow gay people come up to me and say they saw themselves in our books, and because of that they feel like now they can play D&D. And sometimes they say it with happy tears in their eyes. So, you know, and then I'm always like, oh.
Yeah, and we've made a really conscious effort on the streams as well, because when they were creating the books, and Kate Welch is one of our art directors, and you know,
Kate Irwin.
Sorry, Kate Welch is one of our designers. Kate Irwin is our senior art director. Does a lot, if not all, of the art in the book. And so, you know, her and Jeremy really championed that in the beginning. But when we do events like this, you know, in terms of streaming, seeing yourself in the book is fantastic, and that's like the baseline needs to happen. But then when we do events like this, you also want to see yourself at the tables that
Right.
we're playing here. So we've been trying to actually not only encourage, you know, people of all cultures to play the game, but we've been trying to encourage people of all cultures to reach out and get involved in our streaming activities, so that, you know, we can amplify those eyeballs and more people can say, oh, I look like them, you know, oh, you know, she looks like me, you know, and just feel connected to it. So, you know, the products have to tell you you belong. And then, you know, that's like the, you know, talking the talk and walking the walk, right? And then you have to walk the walk, and then you see, oh, wow, look at all their programming. Like, wow, they're actually doing the thing they say they're doing.
Do you find that things like Comicsgate and Gamergate affect Dungeons and Dragons, or are you kind of in this different space of nerd culture where you kind of don't get drawn into online controversy as easily, or do you find that it just kind of blanket hits geek culture across the board?
You know, I think it's been interesting. I think it always affects it, you know, because there's so much crossover, you know, with fans, you know, of D&D often, or into comics and in video games.
Right.
I think one of the advantages we do have as a community is, since our relaunch was just in the past few years, we are really, I think, fueled by new players coming in. So I think in a lot of ways, the people who could be gatekeepers are themselves players only in the past few years.
Right.
And so they maybe, if that's the way a culture that's really embedded in something that's 20, 30, 40 years old, I mean, we have people who've been playing the game for that long, but I think we have had such tremendous growth in the past few years that I don't think it has the same level of effect that you might find in other fandoms. I think also part of it too is with Dungeons and Dragons, you can just buy the starter set and start playing with your friends. You don't necessarily need, you can make your own community very easily. And so I think that's another way where a D&D gatekeeper has trouble, because it's so easy to just go around that damage and create your own community.
Right.
And I think we're seeing a lot of that. Like
There's 900 other doors there. I'll take that one.
Exactly. When we think of like the streamers that we work with, a lot of those who all, you know, you just need a desire to do it, and you can do it. We role-playing games have always had a very flat hierarchy, in that if you go out there and do something interesting, there's always discoverability, there's a lot of hurdles to jump through, but you aren't relying on other people necessarily to make it, like you are in other industries or other fandoms.
And to be honest, we've got really great fans, and they're really supportive in the community. I mean, when you go on Reddit and places like that, you know, some people will look at forums like that and think, oh yeah, there's a mix of whatever. I go on the D&D subreddit, and it's like, oh, here's your tips for this, and I really recommend this, and hey, does anyone have any ideas for this? So the community itself is a very, very collaborative community. And so I think that we probably get less of what you're describing just because of the core ethos of the community.
Right.
Which I think in many ways rises out of the game itself.
Yeah.
Since our game is a social co-op game where it's all about people working together to solve problems. So you occasionally get, the bad apple, but most of our fans want to work together. They want to play together.
Yeah.
People don't want a game with that bad apple.
Right, exactly.
Well, I always feel like it goes two ways. Either they try and gently kind of nurture them into a potentially good apple, or they're kind of like,
that's more common.
okay, this apple has literally just fallen off of the tree and rolled into a sewer, and there's nothing. Just let the apple go. Just let it go.
Yeah. Yeah, they probably have a friend at the table, and so you're right. They probably do try, if the mix isn't right, they probably try and be like, hey, maybe you could tone it back a little. But then after a couple lines, like, I'm not getting invited anymore. That's weird.
Yeah.
Why is my character constantly dying whenever it walks outside the house? That's so strange. And the rest of the session I'm just sat there. Do you find it difficult, or not necessarily difficult, that's the wrong word entirely. Do you find that some of your older players get resentful about the changes in the game and the direction of the new player base? Do you find that there is that rift between old and new, or has it kind of been very, very cohesive in your community? Talk to me a little bit about that.
I think generally speaking, at least my experience has been what I've seen a lot of people coming back to the game. Maybe they haven't played since the 80s or 90s. And so I think you're always going to have people who don't, anything you do, there'll be people who disagree with it. And I think especially when you talk about streaming, I think to a lot of people that's very different and new. People have been around for a long time. But it doesn't really affect your ability to enjoy the game. Kind of getting back to the earlier point, like if you are running a great D&D campaign, it doesn't really matter what someone else is doing at their table.
Right.
But I think we have a lot of people coming back in, and it's a very generational game. Like parents like to play with their kids. So I think there's just a natural tendency in the community to just kind of bend to whatever like those wacky kids are doing these days, because that just kind of sets the tone. And I think so much of playing D&D is that, I think especially for parents or older gamers, it's connecting with that younger audience, connecting with their kids or whoever, teachers playing with their students and things like that. And I think I was talking actually to a friend of mine about this. There's a sense of, I think if you really like RPGs and you really like D&D, you love the sense of like the creativity. You see what it instills, so you get excited when you see the new generation picking it up. This idea that the torch will be carried on, because as a form of game, it's still relatively young.
I just like the idea that there's always more people that you can play with. I like the idea that there's always more and more people that you can go out and at some point play with. And that's always the exciting thing to me. I both appreciate playing with older players and younger players, because it's nice to have an older player at the table because they just know. Like, you don't have to constantly be going, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing, because they'll normally be like, you might want to do this, or did you know that you can do this? And it's like, oh, I did not. Thank you for that advice. So I feel like it's one of those communities where there is a lot more cohesion, because there's so much to learn from either side, no matter where you are.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, you and I were talking about the GaryCon crowd, which is a very old school con in terms of kind of original gamers and people been doing it for a long time. And you were telling me that you've seen a steady influx of young and new players to the convention over the last couple of years, and and I know Luke and all the people behind that really welcome that new blood, and so you've got an old and new mixing great, and they're growing every year and having more fun. So it seems to indicate that the that the communities are merging well.
Yeah, I think there was kind of a transition phase for them.
Was there?
When you have the old school gamers at first were like, who are these?
Were these young whippersnappers?
But then they started playing like classic games like Fight in the Skies or like Chainmail, Gary Gygax's original. Like they could see the younger players were interested in those, and I think it became, this is a great recruiting tool now.
More players,
more players, and they'll run our events, and because I think gamers in general like the history. To your point, you like getting the sense of where has gaming been,
right?
And so I think you definitely see that interplay in the community.
And the heart and soul of D&D really is the same as it was back in the 70s.
Yeah.
I mean, of people getting together to tell these crazy fantasy stories, and also to customize the game to your own taste, because that also helps. So if people want that old school feel, they can tinker with the game to make it feel old school. If people want to play it by the book, they can play it by the book. If they want to shoot off and create a whole new set of rules and say it's D&D, they can do that too. It's just this. It morphs to whatever it is the group wants.
So in terms of the future of Dungeons & Dragons, where next? Because I don't necessarily mean D&D 6, because I know that's almost a banned curse word at this point that you don't utter because it brings...
They like to utter it.
We talk about it.
I tell them no. They talk about it.
We have to talk about
Yeah.
it.
But I mean, what will the next big changes be? What are you looking to change? You don't have to go into specifics. Just are you looking more to change the rules again, or will you change the story elements, or will you add more and more things? Obviously, the new book adds things like entrepreneurial rules, which are very cool. Where next? Like, are we going to start seeing fort building? Are we going to start seeing more story elements? Like, will
God, I want to spoil so many things. I mean, I want to actually give them answers, but I don't. Well, let me give you the company line, which is one of the major changes with 5th edition is we're really focused on storytelling, and we do that on an annual basis. So one of the things we found is there's so many stories to tell, not only in the Forgotten Realms, but in other worlds. But there's so many stories to tell in Dungeons and Dragons that rather than try and change the rules each time to make the game feel different, these guys change the story and make that feel dramatically different than before. I mean, if you skipped a story or whatnot, and you're just coming out of the Underdark, and all of a sudden you're in Waterdeep, you're like, whoa, this is dramatically different. And even if you just happened to be up in a cloud giant castle last time, and now you're here, you're like, oh, there I was an insignificant little whatever, and I could attack anything, and they weren't even going to notice me. And here, if I cut that guy's throat, I'm going to jail.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like changing these flavors in the feel with story is definitely the charter. But with that being said, and with everything that we've been talking about in terms of the new players and seeing what they're doing, how they're acting, we like to be reactive to what the players want and see where the trend lines go, and be ahead of it slightly. So if we see an opportunity to make a mechanical change or add something or try a different gaming type, and the audiences are there, I mean, they'll do it.
Yeah, I think that's a good. I think for us, when we talk about rules, rather than saying how can we change the tabletop role-playing game, going from 5th to 6th or whatever, I think we think a lot more in terms of, hey, who's not playing D&D today, who might want to play in the future, because we're more story-driven.
Yeah.
So it might be a different type of game, and it might be a different platform. Because I think that's how more we think. We're making changes to bring in more people, whether it's the tabletop role-playing game or the D&D universe as a whole.
And when it comes to the dread word 6th edition, I know, it's like a dagger. As we've said before in public, really the community will communicate when it's time for us to move toward that. Because in the meantime, changing the rules is not what we're about. Because even when we've added new rules in our adventures, in Xanathar's Guide to everything, they're all optional. Because it's really crucial for us that people feel like they have a firm ground under their feet. We don't want to be yanking the rug out from underneath them each year with, all right, we changed this rule, and now we changed this rule, and now we changed this rule. We want them to feel like it's the same D&D I've been playing for several years. I now have these new toys I can play with.
If I want to play with them.
If I want to play with them.
Yeah.
So, to confirm.
Spelljammer's next, obviously.
So to confirm, story-driven future? Is that where we were at? Story-driven with optional rules is the future of...
For the tabletop 5e platform, I'd say 100%. And what Mike was alluding to, I think, is definitely one of the things you'll see us experiment a lot more with in the next couple of years, which is, now that the exposure, now that we've got so many of these great, people here spreading the word and getting the visibility, and eyeballs, how much fun and how vibrant and everything, there's a bunch of new players that want to play D&D and just don't know it yet. But they might not want to play a tabletop game with 5 people because maybe they don't like people. No, I'm kidding. But maybe their life doesn't allow for them to have 2 and 3 and 4 hour sessions enough. Maybe it's daunting to get into a campaign thing, so they want some, So what we're going to look for is try to take the core essence of D&D, which is that collaborative storytelling, friends playing together, heroic fantasy, and how do we get other great experiences out there that maybe replace you, what you might want to do at the table, or maybe they're pulling you in and enticing you, and maybe I do need to change my life around so I have time for weekly groups. But basically, rather than kind of waiting for them to come to us, we're going to try and go to them.
Yeah, exactly. I think as a parent of a toddler,
Yes.
who has trouble finding those 4 hours a week, and I run games at the office, but yeah, exactly that kind of thing, fitting into people's lifestyle.
Yeah.
Understanding our audience, and basically getting people to play more D&D. I want to maximize your D&D involvement as as much as we can.
I don't want to call it global domination. It's more like life domination. We want 24/7. Like when you're dreaming, you're building new settings, campaign characters. You wake up and you're like, oh, I got to heal this morning.
It'll be a benevolent dictatorship.
Yes, obviously. That's what I meant.
Good. I look forward to the benevolence of our future overlords. Well, thank you so much for
Mike
taking.
said benevolent, not me.
That's right, and you're the one who makes that choice.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me this morning. I know it's very early.
Oh,
The
it's
coffee
great.
is still sinking in.
I know.
But I look forward to the future. It looks very, very bright.
Good.
So, thank you so much for all the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ash.
Where can people pick up the book in September? Do you want to give a plug? Give a plug. No, you give the plug. You give
All
the
right.
plug. It's your book.
So hopefully you guys have seen all the news. We've announced the main story in September, which is Waterdeep Dragon Heist. I actually have a dragon right here. Here, I'll give you a dragon.
Thanks.
Those are the dragons we're heisting, not the big ones. They're so unruly. And that's going to come out in September. And pretty much wherever you buy your books or your games, whether it's your friendly local game store, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Barnes and Noble, we're carried pretty widely. So support whatever gaming community or bookstore that you normally do, and keep doing that. And then in November, the Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage is following that up, and that's a lot higher levels, a lot more maps. I mean, you guys went map heavy in that one, right? So that's coming out in November, and obviously all of those you can pre-order now. The game stores pre-order, definitely pre-order on Amazon. And then if you're so inclined, D&D Beyond, I use it in my game religiously now as a player. I know you DM with it a lot. You're
I've started
still
using
on
it
the
too.
edge. Yeah,
No, actually, just recently I made
Really?
the switch. Yeah.
So, you can pre-order on there. You can build a character in there for free. So that's a great tool and an entry point for anyone who's going to play. So if you just go to D&D Beyond, you can start checking it out. But if you want to get the book there in a digital form, that's available for pre-order now too. And then, if you're spread out across the globe and you're playing with your friends, Roll20 is an option. Fantasy Grounds is an option, and when the new adventures come out, they always put those in a digital form there too. So pretty much, like I said, we want to come to you. So wherever you are, that's where this product should be.
We will find you.
In a non-scary way, but yes, we will find you. No, I like the scary way.
Yeah, I like
This
scary
goes
stories,
back
more
to us
fun,
actually
right?
being mind flayers.
Elder brains.
No,
Mind flayers
I'm pretty
are
sure I've got the little,
Yeah,
what do you call them that burrow into your brain?
Oh, the intellect of ours.
Yes.
Oh,